Start. It's recording. It's recording. I don't have it this time.
We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order at 6:01. Good evening and welcome to the Monday, September 23rd, 2024 Historic Preservation Commission meeting. And we will go ahead and start with roll call, please.
Commissioner Johnston. Commissioner Laval.
Here.
Commissioner Federico.
Here.
Commissioner Halajian.
Here.
Vice Chair Hatwig. Chair Sponsler.
Here. All right, now I'll go ahead and read out the procedures. For each matter considered by the Commission, there will be first a staff presentation, followed by a presentation from the project applicant. The Commissioners will then have the opportunity to ask questions of staff and applicant before opening to public. Testimony from supporters of the project will then be taken, followed by testimony from those in opposition. Staff may provide a summation if necessary. The applicant will have the right to a final rebuttal presentation prior to closing the public hearing, followed by consideration of the item and action, if any, by the Commission. In accordance with Section 13 of Article 2 of the Historic Preservation Commission bylaws governing length of public debate, all public testimony for those in support and in opposition to the project will be limited to 3 minutes per person. All public testimony must be presented to the Commission at the podium. Any testimony that references race, religion, ethnicity, economic status, national origin, or any other classification protected under state or federal law in a derogatory manner shall be deemed irrelevant and will not be considered by the Commission in making its determinations. If you challenge these matters in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised in oral or written testimony or before the close of the hearing. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to item 3. That's approval of the August 26th meeting minutes. Any changes to the minutes? Okay. Seeing none, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
And a second?
Second.
All right. With a motion and a second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Minutes pass. We will go ahead and move. We'll go ahead and go on to item 4, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Okay, and a second? Okay, motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, agenda is approved. We'll go ahead and move past the item 5 and 6 for consent calendar and continuing matters since there's no items to report in those items. And we'll move on to item 7 for commission items. So item 7A, this is file ID 24-769, consideration of the property owner's request to recommend City Council designation of the following property to the local register of historic resources and adoption of findings pursuant to FMC 12-1607 and FMC 12-1609 for the address of 420 East Terrace Avenue.
Good evening, Commissioners. The first item tonight is the consideration of the property owner's request to recommend City Council designation of the property located at 420 East Terrace Avenue to the local register of historic resource. Application of the designation form was filled by the property owner, and the survey was conducted later to determine the eligibility of the property. The property at 420 East Terrace Avenue is in the Tower District of the city of Fresno. The home was constructed in early 20th century, a period Fresno experienced a rapid expansion of population and economy. During this time, the Tower District began developing as one of Fresno's first suburbs. The property is situated within the proposed Terrace Gardens Historic District, which exemplifies the suburban expansion during this period. Dennis Wheeler is found to be the first property owner of the property. He was a significant figure in the construction industry in the valley, having been involved in major housing developments. Dennis Wheeler and Orville Taylor founded Taylor Wheeler Builders in 1927. It became one of Fresno's most famous building firms, known for their distinctive homes that were unlike anything else in the area at the time. Their architecture contributions have significantly enriched Fresno's built environment. The Terrace Gardens tract was established in October 1930. The house at this address is part of this historic tract. Dennis Wheeler lived in this house until 1967. The residence exhibits characteristics of the Spanish colonial revival style, a hallmark of suburban developments during the early 20th century. The defining features include stucco walls with textured finish, red tile roof, arched openings, deep-set entrance, wooden shutters, chimney with openings near the top, decorative ironwork, patio, and courtyard. Based on Fresno Municipal Code, any building, structure, object, or site may be designated as a historic resource if it is found to meet the following criteria: over 50 years old and possesses integrity to convey its significance and associated with significant event. Persons represent specific type, style, method of construction, or have yield or may likely to yield historic information. Based on the above analysis, the property was constructed in 1934, making it over 50 years old. It retains its integrity as a Spanish Revival residence, with its character-defining features still intact. It is found associated with significant person, and it embodies distinctive architectural characteristics of its period. The property meets the criteria 2 and 3 for historic designation under the Fresno Municipal Code. And the designation is not a project for the purpose of CEQA and will not result in a direct or indirect change in the environment. Thus, staff recommend that the Historic Preservation Commission recommend to the City Council the designation of 420 East Terrace Avenue to the local register of historic resource. And the staff are presented here, and also the property owners are also here to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. Commission, any questions of staff? Okay, any questions that we have for the applicant? Okay, thank you, Dr. Chen. At this point, we'll go ahead and go out. For those that are in support of this item and you'd like to speak, please come forward and you will have your 3 minutes. Okay. Is there anyone that is in opposition? Please come forward. Okay.
Dr. Chen,
Yeah.
Chair, if you might invite the property owner to come up to the podium and you can sit down and let them
Yes.
present, that would be great.
And for the record, go ahead and give your name.
Hello, I'm Kiara Marasigan Surumgard. I come from a family of heritage advocates, so it's very humbling for me to be able to do this for our first home. My husband and I are so grateful to be able to have preserved our ancestral homes in the Philippines, and we're so grateful that even here in California, we're able to do this for our little family. And there's such incredible history, you know, in our home, Dennis Wheeler's home. And I'm so grateful for Dr. Chen because she moved so fast on this. And we are so grateful that she has been as responsive and really on it. So thank you so much for considering our home, and hopefully this will really be in the historic registry soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the commission on this?
My only comment is, why has it taken so long for this to be put on the registry?
I would echo a similar comment to Commissioner Halajian. This is a home that definitely speaks to some significant history of Fresno. And so I am glad to see that it's being brought forth. Obviously, that's one thing that we want to make sure of, is also that the property owners are willing and able of that. So we're happy to see that you guys approached us with regards to this item. Other than that, I don't think we have anything other items for this, so we can go ahead and close the conversation, and we'll look at for actions or motions.
I would be proud to put this forth to be included on our local register.
Okay, I have a motion. Do we have a second? All right. So we have a motion by Commissioner Laval, second by Commissioner Johnston, to forward this on to the City Council for designation. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Motion passes. Thank you so much. All right, now we're going to move on to item 7B. That's consultation regarding the replacement of the vinyl mural on the Beacons Building, historical property number 70, located at 301 Van Ness Avenue.
Kyle will be joining us online.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. I'm with Fowler Packing Company, and we are the parent company to Peel Citrus. We currently have a vinyl mural on the Beacons Building located at 301 Van Ness Avenue, which I've met you guys last year when we went through this process. We are looking to replace the artwork for that vinyl mural and are asking for a 5-year time period to leave it up. That time period is based on the longevity of vinyl artwork. And the reason why we are requesting to swap the artwork is that we have had a brand refresh and we want to update the visuals to match what we currently will be launching with our new packaging and new look in November. As far as the process of how it would affect the wall, there would be no damage or any changes to the condition of the building. This would be actually applied over the existing vinyl, so it wouldn't even adhere the building. We would leave the existing vinyl up and adhere this to the new vinyl. And that the intent of that is to not have to remove and then reapply. We want to minimize the times we remove from the building. And then the time period, when we're asking for 5 years, we're open for timing, but when it does come to the time to remove the mural, we would, of course, we promised this initially, and we would, of course, adhere to this, that once we remove the vinyl, we would restore the paint of the building and restore the Beacons logo if there's any, chipping or anything from the removal of the vinyl. This is an example of the artwork. Again, we, on our current version, we've kept it, we're very Valley Pride. We're local to Fresno, and we want to keep that sentiment with the building, with our new artwork as well, and just know that everyone who drives by knows that Peels is proudly grown in Fresno.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any questions from the commission or comments? Okay.
Can I just?
Yes,
I
Commissioner
just
Law.
wanted to clarify that if there's art changing, that we would be presented with the art it would be, if a 5-year license was granted, that we would be presented with art at least for informational purposes during that time and not just not know what's going on in that historic property. I don't feel comfortable with that.
Okay.
Of course, the intent on our end would be that the art would not change, and if it was to change, just like this process that we're doing today, we would come and present the new artwork.
Okay. So what you're asking is make sure that, that they would come back to us in the event of a change. Okay. Anyone else?
Would that need to be included in the plan they proposed? Or how would we include that?
Let's look.
I know that last year when we initiated this, we did submit the artwork, and then we updated the artwork in the plan, and the permiter with the city of Fresno submitted those changes to you guys on our behalf.
So a question, the first mural you put up, was the intention was to put it up for a short period of time. You're now asking to put up another. Is the request because the first one was so successful? Why do you want to do this again?
That is exactly it, yes. So the short time period previously was to, just have it up for one season. We've just had amazing feedback from the community, from our employees, and constantly getting, emails and text messages about people who are in the downtown area and see it. And because of that, we feel like there's a lot of value in continuing to do it long term.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions of the commission? All right.
I just want to put on the record that I don't want us to get into a position where we're setting a precedent for historic properties to have commercial advertising. So I just think we need to be cautious when these requests come to us. I mean, this is wonderful to support a local brand, and I'm pleased that you had such a great response. But I just don't want us to open the door 100% that historic properties that have good advertising space be immediately approved, and just to put that on the record.
All right. All right, we have that on the record now. I'll go ahead and move it out to the public. Is there anybody that...
Chair,
yeah.
This is for consultation.
Consultation, got it.
So what we would ask the commission is to determine whether or not this requires action by the commission, that you would like for it to come back to your next meeting, or if this is something you believe you could defer to staff and or the architectural subcommittee. But if it's an item that it was too late for us to put it on the agenda for tonight for determination or a decision making, but so we put it on for consultation to get feedback, and then do we need to bring this back to you for the October meeting would be our ask, or is this something you would like to defer with direction?
Okay, so then I'll bring it back for the commission. Do we feel that our comments are sufficient, or do we want it to come back for next month?
The only reason I could recommend having it come back is if there's new or additional information that they would present, and I don't know what other information there is to request. So to me, that just seems like a superfluous act.
Okay. So then, if that's okay with everybody, then I think we could defer to the architectural review subcommittee for if there's any additional changes. Otherwise, we can move forward with what our notes have been. Given the fact that our notes are, we do want to see these if and when they come up for other buildings, as well as the notation that, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on other stuff.
That we saw the actual art.
yeah, that we do get to see the actual art. So. Okay.
Quick question, would we need to then establish criteria that we would use to guide when application of commercial advertising is appropriate on a historic building? Would we need to do that now, or is that something that we set up a task force to consider to develop criteria?
So, commercial advertising is not a permitted use. As we recall from last year, this was approved as a mural, not as a commercial advertising. So, what I would say that the commission, anytime that someone applies to place a mural on a local local resource, we would obviously bring it to the commission if it was a listed resource for your guidance, but it again would be a mural. It is not commercial advertising.
Okay, very good. Okay, so then let me
That's a
rephrase
very
the question.
fine line.
Do we have to establish criteria for when a mural can be applied to a historic resource? Or does that already exist?
No, it doesn't, and I think that that's truly at the discretion of this commission. And so last year it's more than that, that we had this conversation previously, what it was important to the commission to understand how it would be applied, what would be the requirement for removal, what it would look like, that it would not carry a commercial message, and so we're looking for direction from this commission on how you would like for us to handle these in the future. I don't know that you can have a set, it's really a discretionary act of this commission, and having a checklist of, it needs to contain these 5 things or not these 5, that would be very difficult in the sense of a mural. So this was intended as art, and that was the way it was presented to the commission last time, because I cannot approve a commercial, this would be considered, if we call it a commercial message, it is a billboard, and billboards are prohibited. And we had that conversation the last time. So really up to the commission if you would like to continue to have a mural celebrating the Central Valley and bringing attention to this particular local resource, or if there's other direction you would like to provide tonight.
Are there written definitions of the difference between mural and commercial advertising in the city's regulations?
No, there is not a definition of mural, but there is a definition of a commercial billboard, and I can pull that up for you if you'd like that tonight, or if that's something you'd like to defer. If you'll just give me a minute, I can pull it up.
Again, I'm just really worried in my heart about the precedent we're setting. If this, it's beautiful, no question, but is this really mural, or is this an advertisement? And had it been a mural, would they have wanted to sustain it for 5 more years? I just think we need to not just jump in with both feet on this, because there's a precedent here.
Am I allowed to speak right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to, in regards to mural, when we had approached this last year, we were hoping to do a hand painted mural. However, the commission had advised us to do vinyl because of considering the factors of the building and minimizing damage as much as possible. And so that is why it's not a hand painted mural at this point.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to echo what she did say, that was something we talked about, was because of potentially painting over the actual beacon's sign, which is behind that vinyl currently. So do we feel that we want this to come back next month?
Well, what new information are we asking them to bring forward? Do we want to maybe discuss more the definition of a billboard, maybe that would be worth vetting?
That might be something worth vetting for next month. I could see that.
I would agree with that.
I think
Just
if
for
the-
future consideration,
Yeah.
we need to get the jump on this as opposed.
Yeah, and I think for this point, you know, we've working with Fowler Packing with regards to this. I believe, you know, they've been good stewards of it.
They have.
And so I feel comfortable with allowing that, but I do think we need to have a conversation
I
about
do
that
too.
going forward. Okay? So I think right now we're good with deferring back to staff with regards to this project, but as in our next meeting or subsequent meetings, we need to have that conversation regarding what we're going to look at for murals versus things, you know, for commercial advertising. Okay? All
Thank you,
right.
Commission.
Thank you so much.
No, that's worth it.
All right. So now we're going to move on to item 7C. This is our monthly update regarding the Jose Garcia Brewer Adobe.
So I went to the site today in the morning and take some photos of the current condition of the Adobe house. It seems that the property owner has cleaned up the site, but the temporary protection haven't been placed on the place. I was trying to contact the property owner, however, I won't be able to get connected to him. So here's the photos taken today in the morning. And based on the most recent communication with the property owner, he has already ordered the heavy-duty tarp to protect the property, and he is in the process to contact his contractor regarding the permanent protection.
So when do they, what's their timeline on that permanent protection?
He did not, the time he provided to me is 2 weeks from the data he emailed me, but it should happen in middle September. But when I was trying to reach out to him, he did not respond.
Okay. Comments from the commission regarding this?
I will. I'm
Yeah.
just chatty tonight, I guess.
You are chatty Cathy tonight.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but it's useful information. We are heading into potentially the rainy season, and I, having not been on the commission at the time this initiated, I don't know how many people were, but we talked about how long it's been before us. I have concerns about the speed at which the owner will make sure that this is mothballed properly before the weather turns. And my question to commission, who know way more than I do about this, what are our options at this point?
So I believe we've had this conversation with regards to what our options are, and Alicia and Director Clark, correct me if I'm wrong, but this falls under a code enforcement issue, correct? With us, that's why we have some limited. We really have limited ways that we can make an effort to preserve this.
So there is an open code case. It is my understanding that there was a hearing earlier, either late last month or early this month, in which the hearing officer was hearing an appeal of the fines that had been placed on the property for the property owner. I do not know the outcome of that hearing at this point in time. So here are some of my concerns with pushing too hard. The code enforcement is very happy to help us, right, by trying to get the property owner to come into compliance with maintenance. But ultimately, if it becomes a safety issue, what they would be directed to do would be to remove the structure. So what we're hoping to achieve is that the property owner will comply with the conditions of approval for the entitlement, which is to preserve 2 of the walls. We've given instructions on how to do that. I believe some of the commissioners have provided names of contractors. So I think the commission has been very supportive of trying to get the right thing done. And to get the 2 walls preserved so that we can have a safe site, because right now it is unsafe if someone were to get onto the site. So we definitely want it to be safe, but we're also trying to thread that really fine line in preserving a listed resource.
So what I'm hearing, and I know sometimes I might be a little crazy sometimes. What I'm hearing is really maybe we need to be encouraging the community to really say something to possibly get this moving forward. Not necessarily say something to the city, but say something, start a letter writing something, campaign towards the property owner.
I can't speak to whether or not that would be effective, right? Based on our role. I know the tools that are currently in our toolbox. I know that we have sent out letters earlier this year to property owners of listed resources about financial incentives for their listed resources, ways that they can take advantage, whether it's through renovation and maintenance of the property. So we're trying from the carrot perspective. Code enforcement is working on the stick perspective. I'm still hopeful, but I am very concerned as we go into another rainy season. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Is there any way in which a lien could be filed against the property? If the owner doesn't comply with the conditions of approval and the building were to be rendered unsafe and therefore demolished, he's effectively ignored the conditions of approval. That brings value to the property. If he were to sell the property, that might be the only incentive there is to avoid a lien, if that's possible.
So a lien can be placed only for the time and the fines that are established in the code for non-compliance. So they started with the fines. If the property owner does not pay those fines, then the lien is placed. If the city has to go out and actually demolish, then that would be a lien that would be placed against the property. So that's when the city has the authority to go do that. Right now, there's not a way to place a lien on non-compliance with the conditions of approval. Because remember, those are an entitlement given to the property so that when they do actually do the project, that's the requirement of the project.
I guess the incentive for the owner would be, the current owner would be, if and when the property is sold, that the lien or assessment or whatever it is against the property would make it harder to sell. That I can imagine might get someone's attention, if there is such a mechanism.
Certainly we can talk to code enforcement and see if there are other mechanisms from a financial perspective to place liens. I do know that since the second phase hasn't been built yet, there isn't a way for the planning or building permits to be held up for that second phase of the project. That would be the other tool, right? If they were chomping at the bit to move forward, with phase two, we could withhold those permissions until that condition was completed.
I guess I bring that up because I think the owner was participated last month, and he intimated that it might get to the point where he just walks away from the project and sells the land. So if the value of the land or the development of the land is more onerous and making it harder to sell, I could understand why he might want to take action now to not find himself in that situation.
Yeah, thank you. We will certainly talk to code enforcement to see if there's an opportunity to place a lien on the property.
So is there a point, the two things that come to my mind is, I know we talked about the tools in the toolbox. So how do we go about adding a tool where we go to something like this where we're almost certain that the person's is gonna essentially wait for this to fall apart, that we go to a point where we do a restoration or at least a minimal preservation of it? You know, it's a form of abatement, but not necessarily abatement where it's demolished.
So, you know, the city does have a tool that it has not used for this kind of project, but certainly I can talk to code enforcement about it, which is our receivership program, where the city would go to court and ask for a receiver to be appointed who does the work, and then typically the property is sold, and then the net, so the cost of the receiver, the cost of the city time, and the net then is granted back to the property owner. Typically those are pretty egregious situations in tenant occupied property typically is where I've seen that used, but I can consult with them and see if this would be an option in this particular case, that they would do the corrective action as a receiver.
Actually, I don't want to belabor this, but if it came down to that, why wouldn't we just have the entire building restored instead of this kind of intermediate position we took to work with the owner to save the two walls? If it came to that, I'd say restore the building.
So an entitlement has already been given to the property, right? So when...
Based on conditions, right? If you do this, we will do this. And he hasn't done what he said he was going to do.
Yeah.
Well,
So
the condition of approval is the end state is that those two walls are preserved. It's not a if this then that, right? So a condition of approval says, you know, you've complied with the conditions when this occurs, not an if then statement. I don't know, and again, I would need to consult with the city attorney regarding the revocation of the entitlement prior to the time's going to expire for the project probably soon, so then you could go back to that position. But right now there's already a legal right to develop the property in that manner.
But didn't the original conditions of approval require restoration of the building, and our compromise with him was, all right, we'll take two walls.
It was a revision of the conditions of approval. So someone would need to apply to change those, right? So that's an application process. Typically that's done by the property owner.
So do we know when the current...
When the entitlement expires, I don't know. We would need to check on that.
Because he came to us 2 years ago now? 2 or 3 years ago now was when we first had that conversation about the two walls. So I think you're right. It should be coming up very soon.
Typically, you have 36 months from granting, unless it's been extended. But we need to check on that planning entitlement. That's a really great question that we have not researched.
Because I think if I'm getting the mood of this commission is that at this point, because we gave him that opportunity to build, if there has not been movement in that 36 months, then I think we would want to return to our original position. Because we made that, we made that with the idea that, yes, you're going to build. And not this, yes, we're going to allow you to do that, and then sit on it. So please chime in if that's something that people feel otherwise, that we feel like it's at this point where we worked with him and he didn't work with us. And so now it's okay, then we're going to return to where we originally were, and you're going to have to restore the whole building. You're not going to have that clubhouse that you wanted to have. And then at the same time, I think we do want to possibly look at, like you were talking about, potential, what's legality, what's the possibility or non-possibility of receivership of some of these things.
I think that compromise was sometime on or about October of '21.
Okay.
So we could be, so depending on when the date was that it was granted and it was effective, we could be coming close to the normal expiration timeframe. But again, I'd need to pull up that planning entitlement and see what that date is. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on this item? And yeah, Paul, I do think you're right. It looks like it's November of '21 is when we had that conversation. First had that conversation. Okay. So we'll move on now to item 7D. This is discussion of pending legislation AB 2580 that would require analysis of the impact of historic resignations on a city ability to meet its housing needs.
So this discussion is brought up by our chair, and staff are here doing a presentation, generally do a brief introduction about it to open the floor for the discussion. And as many of us have already know that AB 2580 modified the California planning and zoning laws to require cities and counties to adopt a general plan with a specific focus on historic preservation role in housing development. Currently, the bill is very close to becoming law, pending the governor's approval. Specifically, it requires the housing element in the general plan to include an analysis of historic preservation practice and policies, and an assessment of how existing and proposed historic designations affect the ability of housing needs. And also AB 2580 also requires the annual report submitted to the Office of Planning and Research and the Department of Housing and Community Development to include a list of all historic designations in the past year, just as a request posted by the Certified Local Government Annual Report. And also it required to include the status of any housing development projects proposed for the new historic designations. And the potential implications for historic preservation under AB 2580 would include increased examination on how historic designations impact housing development, requiring local government to assess and report on the cost and efforts of preserving historic buildings within the context of meeting housing needs, potentially influencing future preservation decisions to balance housing demands. So with that, please go ahead and open the floor for discussion.
Okay, thank you. So I did ask Alicia to bring this to us because as of today, today's the final day that the governor either can sign, veto, or it be considered a pocket signature where it's the 12th day and it can just go approve without signature. And so this kind of impacts our work with regards to how we look at historic designations as well as historic districts. I feel that this is one of the things that we're going to have to be looking at as we look towards new historic districts, which is what we've been talking about, especially with trying to accelerate the time for Chinatown and things like that, that we're going to have to include some sort of housing element, some sort of design guidelines for new construction within those historic districts. This was presented to us specifically at, also presented to us at the Historic Preservation Conference. And one of the things that was noted was the groups that are advocating for this really want to essentially, they're looking at it from a perspective that historic designation of property and historic designation, historic districts are being used as a way to block the state's housing requirements. Now, the argument, you know, some can make an argument for or against that. Currently, the amount of properties we have in our districts and individually listed is less than 0.5% of all the building stock in the entire city. So it's something that is very small, but at the same time could easily, we could easily be looking at either less applications or even a statewide rescinding of applications of historic districts or historic properties, depending on how far people feel or don't feel that we're going to go with this. So I'd like us to consider that as we go forward with our historic districts, that we need to start thinking about how we look at that from those design guidelines perspective as well, so that we can make sure that when we go to create that district, that we have that in play, because we know that people are going to come in, they're going to have they are going to have a mandate to build, and we want to make sure that at least, for example, like in Chinatown, that it matches the current architecture or matches the architecture of the area that's there. So with that, I'll turn it over to any other commissioners.
So it seems to me that there's kind of three things to look at. One is new housing construction in a historic district, renovation of an existing historic housing project in a historic district, and adaptive reuse of a historic building or any building in a historic district, right?
Correct.
That adaptive reuse going from one use to housing.
Correct.
That's how that this would be applied. And it seems to me that maybe adaptive reuse is probably the more likely or the more common to occur. Is that right? Do you agree?
I would say that that's probably going to be the most common that we're going to find for sure here is adaptive reuse. So, like I said, and like what Leisha said, it hasn't been completely signed, although today is the last day. It could be potentially signed or not. It is something that I guess has been brought up a couple of other times before in the legislature, so it's something that's definitely being pushed. So it's important. It's critical for us to be aware of that.
But I'm hearing that at this point, historic designation has not been a significant impact in our housing stock.
No, I don't think it has. I mean, you know, Director Clark might be able to give us a better answer of that. You know, in fact, I think you've seen a lot of times where we've had historic properties where we have had adaptive reuse, and it's actually been a positive towards our meeting housing requirements and demands rather than a negative. The advocates of this specifically had noted that they didn't want people to essentially create these historic districts or historic properties that would restrict the amount of changes that occur just for the sake of, you know, keeping, you know, mixed income, low income properties out of their area. You know, that's kind of what their drive at this is, although that's not something that we've experienced here.
And there's also a reporting requirement. I think,
Yes.
in that, and I'm wondering what kind of.
It looked
what
like
that
the
will
reporting
require.
requirement, and Leisha, correct me if I'm wrong, is the fact that they need to know, A, not only what we have designated, but B, if there's been any types of permits or actual housing constructed as a result in these properties, correct? Okay.
And this is geared specifically to multifamily housing, correct? Or is it any housing?
It's for any housing.
Any housing.
Okay. So thank you for allowing me to have this added to the agenda. I think it was important for us to know so that we have that better edification going forward when it comes to what our next steps are going to be especially as we look at new historic district coming online.
And I had one other question.
too.
When you went to the historic preservation
Conference,
did they discuss about how this action would comfortably fit in with local, state, and federal historic preservation law?
Because it's not really touching the standards and things like that, like the Secretary of Interior standards, it's more of they want to know. Essentially, what they're looking for is they're trying to look for who's abusing the system and who's not abusing the system. Even though they don't really have there's no real evidence that the system's being abused that way. The concept is that historic districts are being created so that they can avoid having to create, density housing in areas where they didn't want it to be, or things like that.
So if we decided to designate a historic district, then that would be under scrutiny?
Correct.
Or would have to be reported on?
Yeah, it would have to be reported on.
Mr. Chair, I also, just to clarify, do you see this ever as a problem, potential problem, with if we're designating a historic district, which does come with responsibilities for those homeowners that might make restoration or maintenance of that home, like the one we approved today? Do you see the state concerned about that pretty much does put you in a minimum income situation to take on that responsibility when you buy the house?
Honestly, I don't know if that's...
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. It's
I don't know if that's the intent.
Does that make
today.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that conversation we've had with the realtors, right?
Correct.
To make sure that a potential buyer knows what they're getting into would alleviate that concern, or address that concern.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to item 7E. That's the update on our regularly monthly topics, starting with any staff updates.
So in the past months, we have 28 entitlements review completed and 8 106 historic review completed, as also inquired by our chair regarding the 333 North Blackstone Avenue. I did go to the site and take photos and also have a conversation with the property owner. They did follow the instructions provided by the architecture subcommittee, and all wood windows have been replaced and painted as an historic appearance. Currently, they are in the process of making a replica of the historic railings. The railings haven't been placed there. And for mitigation program, we received 6 applications in total, and 3 were denied because the proposed work does not meet the requirement regarding the character defining feature of the property. And we have completed all the site visits for Mills Act. Among them, we did receive a notification from the property owner. There two properties were withdrawn from the application because they explained that they did a tax reduction calculation and they won't benefit from the program. So they determined to withdraw the application. And one property owner postponed the application because they kind of like also concerned of the tax reduction. And for the remaining applications, we will process with it. And it will be presented to the Historic Preservation Commission in the next months.
All right, thank you. Any updates from the architectural subcommittee?
Just that we completed the Mills Act reviews.
Okay. Plaque design, we don't have any updates currently for plaque design. And then economic incentive. Okay. So we'll go ahead and close off those items, and we'll move on to item 8, the chairperson's report. Wanted to note a couple things that were brought to my attention. The first one is I've been contacted by Nick Kennedy with the Tower Theater property with regards to the fact that this year marks the 85th anniversary of the opening of the theater, and that they'd like to do some sort of celebration and conversation with it. And so part of that is looking at potentially a date that they would like to be able to have an open house. I have provided information that essentially they need to, they need to discuss if they're going to have that open house with the city, given the fact it's a city property now and things like that, but that if they need the history or the information that we would be happy to help with that. Okay. And then I was reached out by Raul Pickett with regards to a request to move forward on the Chinatown Historic District application. Now, I know that's something that we have been working on, correct? And part of the issue that we have with it right now is that it was last done in 2006, so it's 18 years old and needs to be updated before we move forward on that. So I did let Raul know that as well, that it's something that's been a topic of ours, but that at the same time that we needed to make sure that it was update to the current environment that's in that area. So that's all I have for my report. Okay. We'll move on to unscheduled items. So start with members of the commission. Does anybody have anything? Okay. Staff. All right, now we'll move on to members of the public. So those that would like to speak on a topic that's not been on the agenda, please come forward to the podium and give your name and address for the record.
My name is Vaughn Dermugger-Deachin, 416 West Sample Avenue, Clovis, California, 93612. And I'm here today to get some information about how to proceed. I've been before this body the last few years regarding the Vartanian House and the outbuildings and relocating them. The holdup over the past few years has been finding a site for it. Recently had a meeting with city officials and Marlene Murphy. She informed me that, or us, that in the near future, in October I believe, the site that we wish to relocate the buildings to, which is the southeast corner of Ventura, Cesar Chavez and M Street. That piece of property will be declared surplus by the successor agency, thus opening it up to projects. We intend to move forward with our relocation project. I've been in talks with Ralph Cachadurian in the city on the pre-process there of all the information that we need to do on their end, and I'd like to find out from this body what we need to present to you, or what the process is in terms of your involvement with our relocation plans.
Okay. So Vaughn, I would say the biggest thing that we're going to need is obviously when you start to move forward with the actual relocation procedures and the permits, that'll obviously go to Leisha with regards to that. It'll come to our architectural review committee with regards to what the process is and what's going to be done with it. You know, it is a relocation, so we're just going to have to make sure, you know, how it's being taken apart and things like that. But that's going to be as part of that permitting process
So
for the
my first
relocation.
contact is with Lilicia then?
Yep. So, and then we'll see that, and I think, you know, for this commission, that's something that home we would like to see, you know, saved for sure. So,
Great, we appreciate that.
thank you so
very
much. Any other members of the public?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Daniel Brannick. I live in the Tower District. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm just taking this opportunity to talk a little bit about the historic silos located at 315 North H Street that are currently owned by Producers Dairy and are scheduled for demolition. There's been some coverage in the paper about it. I wasn't at your meeting in August, so I don't know if there's been some discussion on it yet or not. I see Jason Hatwick isn't here. I incidentally talked to him just out of curiosity to see if this body had ever reviewed it in his memory, and that hadn't come up. And through like some various correspondence, including some with city staff and review of the draft EIR that was prepared for Producers demolition, closure of H Street, and truck parking project, it sounds like the only historic determination on this it goes back to like either 1979 or 1980 in terms of being reviewed by a local body. It's really, you know, there's a lot of weird like nitty-gritty pieces, but I'm concerned about a couple things going on with this. One of them, if there really is a larger project out there that's being kind of mum, we know there's going to be truck parking. If that's a ministerial project, it's not going to trigger CEQA, it's not going to trigger a historic review thing, but if there is a CEQA trigger there, I'm concerned that this is improperly piecemealing. So, the other part of it is if we're really making a decision, you know, saying that something can't go get relooked at, it's almost 45 years since that decision helped or took place. I've not looked over the applicable historic preservation ordinance that was in effect at that time in detail. I've kind of gone back and looked at it and I'm still trying to make heads or tails of it, but I'm curious whether that decision, like, you know, can or should still hold up. So mostly just want to show up and say, hey, somebody's out there paying attention. It's not just happening on social media. I know some of you in real life, and I appreciate your commitment to preservation of history, of culture, et cetera, in Fresno. So I thank you for your time tonight, and that's all. Take care.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I had actually inquired to Dr. Chen about this particular property, and she did look it up, and that the determination that it was not of historic value was many decades ago. Is there a procedure that I've never encountered that before, that the process, does it have merit to look at it again in another time zone, or you could fill in the blanks of whatever you sent to me. But that question was raised, was that the initial assessment was many decades ago.
Okay. So I don't think we can speak to this specifically tonight just due to Brown Act rules, but it is something that can definitely be looked at and possibly brought forth as part of the next meeting, if necessary, just because of the concern in there. I am aware of that project as well. I know there's some other components of that project that have been discussed as well, and not sure exactly where those items are either for it. Okay. Anybody else?
Good evening. My name is Ryan Eddings. My address is 1616 South Minnewawa. I was actually appointed to be on the commission, but apparently didn't make it on the agenda tonight. So I wanted to introduce myself. I'll be here next month.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome and congratulations. All right, anyone else in the public? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close that portion of the meeting. Our next meeting will be October 28th at 6 o'clock. We will be in room 2165, so we won't be in council chambers this next month, but we'll be back in our little intimate setting that we have. And with that, I'll look for a motion for adjournment.
Moved.
All right, I have a motion to adjourn and a second.
Second.
All right, meeting is adjourned at 7:06. Thank you.